Welcome to the Rancher's Voice, presented by the Montana Stockgrowers Association. I'm Jay Bodner, MSGA's Executive Vice President.
And I'm Raylee Honeycutt, Director of Natural Resources. Join us for conversations surrounding policy, the legislature, and issues that matter most to ranching families in Montana.
Welcome to this week's episode. This week we're going to be talking a little bit about some federal updates on some meat processing bills that have been just recently introduced. We're also going to be talking a little bit about last week's bill hearings, and then we're also going to be looking forward to this week's on February 1st and see what's out there for us on the legislative front.
Yes, and we want to remind our listeners to make sure to subscribe to the Rancher's Voice. Follow us on social on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Make sure to like, comment, and post each episode. And if you have questions for us, we would love to hear from you. So you can email those to Kenny, Keni, at mtbeef.org. So Jay, you mentioned it kind of in the opening, but let's talk a little bit about what's going on the national landscape. We've had some movement as it relates to meat processing over the last couple days, and just wanted to hit on where we're at with a couple bills that rolled out this last week. First, one thing I think it's important to note is that the biggest challenge right now with interstate commerce is this traceability if you have adulterated meat, and whose authority, if it goes across state lines, can actually recall or regulate those types of meats. And so we've had two bills that are steps in the right direction this last week, where they address food safety along with kind of consumer confidence. And let's talk about those a little bit. So the first one is the New Markets for State Inspected Meat and Poultry Act, which our own Senator Tester rolled out.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there is a lot of interest in, because we have a state program that meets the federal guidelines for state inspected meat and federal inspected meat. And so there's a lot of effort just generally among states like us that have this program to be able to ship that across state lines, like you mentioned. So we're appreciative of Senator Tester for bringing this forward. This bill would allow, it's still regulated by the Food and Safety Inspection Service, FSIS, which we talk about. And it would allow those meats to be sold across state lines. Certainly from Senator Tester, he's had a lot of interest in this. He's brought previous bills in the past. This is kind of central to him and his efforts, and we certainly support him on this front. I mean, certainly from a Montana perspective, we're very proud of the product we sell. We know that it's safe, and we have that opportunity through a bill like this to be able to ship those across state lines and then let other consumers anywhere in the nation enjoy our product.
Definitely. And the second act that I wanted to bring up is the DIRECT Act that also rolled out last week. It stands for Direct Interstate Retail Exemption for Certain Transactions Act. That is a mouthful. And it was introduced by Representative Dusty Johnson from South Dakota. This originally was a bill from last session, but due to the timing, had to be reintroduced for the 117th Congress. It amends the Federal Meat Inspection Act so that processors, butchers, and other retailers can sell retail quantities of beef across the state. And what retail quantities kind of equals is 300 pounds or less at a time. The other important thing to note of this act is that it has to be e-commerce. So the sales transaction has to be done via the internet. But again, another great step in kind of opening up some opportunities for producers in our state and getting markets across state lines. It is important to know, I just recently heard an interview from Jake Fettis from our organization, and he noted that he receives roughly 10 to 15 requests per week for meat from out of state. So if everyone that we know is experiencing that, it does open quite a bit of opportunity for those folks. So with these two bills, they're great. We'll probably see more in the coming weeks as kind of the federal level rolls out and tries to work on finding solutions for us.
Yeah, we certainly did see a number of these type of bills kind of roll out late last year. There was certainly a lot of interest just with COVID response. But certainly, I don't think that interest is going to diminish any, and there's going to be renewed interest in finding these kind of opportunities. And so we're certainly going to be looking and being supportive of these type of bills and generating more income and more value for our Montana producers and Montana processors.
So that kind of wraps up what's kind of happening on the national landscape. So let's jump into what our week looked like last week.
Yeah, so we did have the opportunity in House Bill 2, that's the General Appropriations Bill, to support MSU and the ag experiment stations. It was, once again, a great hearing to be able to talk about ag research and what we're doing out there with these experiment stations, improving different products, strains, and research for not only from the grain side, but also from the animal side. And we got a chance to get up there and support MSU and their efforts. And certainly a lot of the other ag groups did too. And we were... MSU went through, they had Dean Bajwa there. We had Cody Stone with Extension. They talked pretty extensively about each one of their segments of the MSU. And so it was a great opportunity to talk a little bit about that. There was one, certainly one statistic that I think really did hit home is for every dollar invested, it brings $45 back to the state. So that's money well invested.
Also, the Senate Finance and Claims Committee heard Senate Bill 58, which we've talked about with our listeners in the past, but this was to provide a fund transfer for the Livestock Loss Board. That was the hearing did occur and it was passed out of committee, so that is now being transmitted to the second chamber. If you remember, it was also heard in Senate Ag, and then they redirected it to Senate Finance, and so now it's off the Senate side and moving on to the House side.
Yeah, also last week, just in the Senate fishing game, we did hear House Bill 108. So this had previously passed the House, moved over to the Senate. This bill came from the PLPW, the Private Land Public Wildlife Advisory Group, and it did enforce stricter penalties for trespassing. We know that typically the current fines are not enough to deter some of those habitual offenders. So those are the folks, the bad actors that we're after. It was a good hearing, and then shortly after that committee hearing, that committee did take executive action later that day on that bill and passed it out of committee. So that's all supportive. We're certainly supportive of that.
On the House agricultural side, we stood in support of Senate Bill 27. This is the livestock loss multiplier that, again, we've spoke about. It is sponsored by Senator Butch Gillespie. That bill was heard in committee, and we're still waiting on executive action for that bill, but hearing that will probably come in the next week. So again, very supportive of adding that multiplier to livestock losses toolbox.
Yeah, in the House Fish and Game, we did have House Bill 147. This dealt with establishing a Montana Hunters and Anglers Community Fund. MSGA, we did support that. It did create kind of a donation that would be a grant-based program for communities. There was a lot of support for this committee and for this particular bill. In the end, this bill was tabled in committee.
And then I had the opportunity to testify in the House Energy, Technology, and Federal Relations Committee, which is a committee that we don't get to go in front of very often. But we had an opportunity to testify for HJ3, which is a resolution. It was brought by Representative Tom France, and the resolution was for creating a conservation fee at gate entrances at both Glacier National Park and Yellowstone National Park. Ultimately, we stood in opposition of it, not because of the concept. We actually have policy supporting a concept of a conservation fee within MSGA's policy. However, felt that the language of conservation fee and how the funds would be used was kind of a general blanket, and supported a more direct and defined use of those funds, specifically wildlife management and issues that are created based off wildlife, so testified that we'd like to see that funding go for brucellosis management, predator management, and livestock loss. Currently, that is amendments are being worked on, and we're working closely with the sponsor to see where that resolution may go.
Yeah, and so just typically how Stock Growers operates on those kind of bills, we supported the policy. We have policy that supports that, but when you need amendments, you go in as an opposition, you provide those amendments, and then if those amendments are adopted, then you can move to a positive support position. So yeah, I think we'll probably see those amendments put on, and that bill has a higher likelihood of potentially passing.
Definitely. And then quickly, just to run through a variety of bills that we were watching over this last week. House Bill 48, which was in regards to property reappraisal that we spoke to you about. That bill was actually withdrawn and will no longer be moving forward. So update on that. House Bill 173 was in regard to state timber sales. It had its hearing in the first house. House Bill 225 regarding wolf trapping season dates also held a hearing. Senate Bill 62 regarding revised unlawful possession laws as it relates to wildlife. That also had a hearing in its first house. And then Senate Bill 106 regarding vet tech licenses and qualifications. That bill was heard and then moved forward. It moved to a table in its first committee. And then last but not least, Senate Resolution 4, which was the confirmation of the DEQ director, was passed and he has been confirmed. So just a quick rundown of the other bills that we're watching for this last week.
Yeah, so just kind of moving into this week, once again, there's a number of bills that will be not only testifying in, but certainly a number that we'll also be monitoring and watching very closely. Just to start off on Senate Fish and Game, there's Senate Bill 143. This deals with generally revised outfitted license on Class B10 and B11 elk and deer licenses. There is a small increase in those and a different pool for those licenses. One of the things that this bill does also affect is that for each one of those licenses that are applied for, there's a $100 fee. If you add all those $100 fees up, they're proposing almost $1.4 million in revenue that ultimately could be used in kind of public, working with landowners for public access. So that provision of the bill we think is really a good positive step. So that's a bill that I'm still contemplating, but a bill that we may support for that provision.
Moving on to Wednesday of this upcoming week, we have some budget bills that we will be testifying on. The first one falls under House Bill 2, which is that general appropriations bill, and DNRC's budget will be heard on Wednesday. We plan to support that specifically for our Montana Grass Commission budget kind of falls under the agency budget as well as the sage grouse program. So we will be there supporting those two items along with the entirety of the agency budget on Wednesday.
Yeah, in addition to that, on Wednesday, we have House Bill 14. That is the long-range planning bonding program. And within that, we have the Montana University System, the Montana Ag Experiment Station have a couple of projects within that. So that's also going to be in Wednesday. That's something that we would also be in support for that.
And then on Thursday, something that we've talked about many times so far on this podcast is House Bill 14 and the Long Range Building Bonding Program bill. The Veterinary Diagnostic Lab falls under that. And so we will be there in support of the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab in hopes that we can get that pushed through for the first time this session.
Yeah, and we will be joined this week by our president, Jim Steinbeiser. He will be in person to testify in support of that. So this is certainly one of the high priorities for us for stock growers, and we're pretty appreciative to work with this committee as we look to get this bill passed and a new veterinary diagnostic lab built.
Absolutely. And then a few other bills that we're tracking, we kind of put these under our watch bucket, but Senate Bill 68, which is in regard to homestead exemptions. That will be heard this week. Senate Bill 136 regarding criteria for permits and water right changes.
Yeah, and this bill also deals strictly with the water, legal availability for water too. So any change permit or new permit for water, this is just kind of a clarification, but we think this might be a bill that we can get behind and support also. So one we'll be watching very closely.
In addition, Senate Bill 164, which is a revised non-degradation standard for nutrients, along with House Bill 93 regarding the noxious weed seed-free program. House Bill 163, which is revised Fish and Game Commission members. If you remember, we chatted about that before. That would be moving the Fish and Game Commission from 5 members to 7 members. And then last, Senate Bill 133, which is in regards to property tax appraisals and tax appeal processes.
Yeah, certainly anything to deal with tax appraisals is going to be on our watch list. We watch all those very closely just to make sure that you as members and landowners, that if you're impacted by this, we want to know exactly how, and if it's positive for us or if it is something that doesn't work for landowners, then that's something we're going to oppose. So, yeah. It's going to be, once again, another busy week for us, so we look forward to that. I think just kind of moving on, we do have another special guest with us this week. Yeah. We had the pleasure of having Director Mike Foster with the Department of Ag join us. And Mike has been very supportive of ag for a long time, and it's great to see him in that new position. So with that, I'd like to welcome Director Mike Foster. I'd like to welcome this week the new Director of Ag, Mike Foster. Mike has had a strong working relationship with agriculture for a lot of years, certainly in his previous position as the state director for Farm Service Agency. And we worked with Mike on just a number of issues, and it's been a pleasure, and we're excited in your new position. But Mike, just for some of our listeners that may not be familiar with some of your previous work, we thought maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Jay and Raylee. It's great to be on. I appreciate this invitation very much. As you said, I have a long record of working with agriculture, and the Stockgrowers Association has always been very special to me. When I was a legislator, all those many moons ago, I worked very closely with the stockgrowers, and in fact, got to go to some of the meetings for the Mark County Stockgrowers Association. And so it was always great. I even went down to your office in Helena from time to time just to see how folks were doing. And I've always enjoyed that. I very much look forward to working with the stockgrowers. I was born and raised in Townsend. And so, of course, that's an ag community. And it's very much influenced me, and being a big fan of agriculture and wanting to do whatever I can to help support the industry. And that certainly was true when I was in the legislature. And then, as Jay mentioned, when I was the head of FSA, Farm Service Agency for Montana, prior to this job. And, there were some instances there where the national regulations didn't fit real well with what was happening in Montana, particularly with the terrible blizzards that we were having, like the winter of 2019 and beyond. And I was successful in getting some changes made. And I have to tell you, it was not easy, but it certainly benefited our stock growers and livestock people in Montana. And I'm thrilled about that, and I hope to carry forward with that with the Montana Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, and there was one instance in particular where we were kind of in the middle of those discussions, and we just happened to have a board meeting, and you brought yourself and your whole team up to talk to our board, and we worked through a lot of those issues, and we very much appreciate that. And I think that's a good indication of how you like to do business, and we like to do business similar ways.
Well, thank you, and we'll keep doing it.
Well, Director Foster, the legislature is top of mind for a lot of people. And as you mentioned, you are a previous legislator, but now kind of sitting in a different seat as we move into the 67th session. So your department actually has already presented its budget this session. And so we were hoping that you could kind of give our listeners a high-level overview of what was presented and any key pieces of legislation key pieces of that budget that was presented that we should be aware of.
Well, I'm happy to do that. And first, I should probably say that I was extremely fortunate as a legislator in both the House and the Senate, because my district included all of Broadwater, Marr, and Jefferson counties, and then the rural parts of Lewis and Clark and Cascade counties. So it was agriculture all day long, and that was great. But as far as our budget goes, yes, we gave our presentation on January 13th, and I'm not going to bore you with some of the technical aspects of what a budget entails, but it's important to keep in mind that the Department of Agriculture is largely a fee-for-service agency. In fact, our general fund money is only about 10% of our entire budget. So here we are working with the largest industry in Montana, and we're like the smallest state agency. But sometimes less government is better, and we can probably all agree on that. But at the same time, it's important to keep in mind that our mission calls us to work with the agricultural industry to help you succeed. That's my goal. And livestock, of course, is a huge part of the agricultural industry in Montana. The whole umbrella, livestock's huge, as you all know. And so small general fund money, small agency, 117 employees, but we're doing whatever we can to help. We had, besides just our regular kind of costs, we have a request to replace equipment used at our analytical lab in Bozeman that's used for groundwater monitoring. And that's just kind of reached the end of its life. We need to replace that. We have a request to purchase a lab inventory management system to build on our efficiencies in the state grain lab. And as you know, the Department of Livestock is working to secure a new facility for their veterinary diagnostic lab. We recognize the importance of the services provided by that lab, both for Montana's livestock producers as well as our public health at large. So we're working in collaboration with the Department of Livestock on House Bill 14, the long-range building program, to secure a new facility for the veterinary diagnostic lab that's at MSU in Bozeman. So our analytical lab is attached to that proposal, and so we're working together, and hopefully we'll be successful. Any help you can give there, of course, is always appreciated. And as you know, any request for general fund money will be really difficult this session, maybe even more difficult than it usually is. But we think this is a very valuable project, and we're hoping that it's successful.
Yeah, thank you. And we, very much would agree with you. It's nice to have that collaboration on a project of that magnitude when we look at a new diagnostic lab. And I think something that if agriculture all gets behind that, we do also bring a little money to the table. It certainly has an opportunity to boost, I think, our chances of getting that bill passed. So, we're very much looking forward to that partnership. I know that the department does have a number of bills that you've brought to the session, and you're kind of looking at, and there's always ways to kind of improve some of the systems that we work on. And So maybe you can just talk about a couple of the bills that that the department has on your list.
Well, we only have 3, so it won't take too long to go through them. And we're doing very well so far in the session with our 3 bills. The first one is House Bill 93, sponsored by Representative Ken Walsh of Twin Bridges. And this bill addresses the need for more noxious weed seed-free certification of products. And in particular, we've got a lot of interest in gravel for construction projects and that sort of thing. And so that bill allows for us to do that, and it's being received very positively. So far, it's gone through committee unanimously, then passed nearly unanimously from the House floor on second reading. And it's actually today it's up for a third reading. So that bill's doing very well. House Bill 94 is just really a cleanup bill on the new student loan program that we have to help young people who are getting their college degrees and want to become an employee or a business related to agriculture. And it was left out of the bill last time that we would help also with private lending institutions. So that's all this bill does, but it will expand that out in a very positive way to help those young people who want to be part of agriculture, and we think that's great. Then the last bill is House Bill 142, which is sponsored by the chair of the House Agriculture Committee, Representative Josh Kastmeyer of Fort Benton. And that bill addresses hemp. And the whole purpose of this bill is to make a clear delineation between hemp and marijuana. And so we're trying to be very close to the rules and regulations of the U.S. Department of Agriculture regarding hemp. And so this bill, again, is important to make sure that the hemp producers in Montana are regulated in a way that is not only fair on our part, but consistent with what the U.S. Department of Agriculture is demanding for that particular industry. And again, that bill has had good success as well, making it through the House Ag Committee. And House Bill 94 is also on the floor of the House today for second reading, debate, and vote. And I should mention that bill is also sponsored by Representative Walsh. And we're very optimistic about the future of that bill as well.
Excellent. Well, now we kind of want to shift away from the legislature and talk about another topic that is a topic of conversation right now, and that's meat processing. So prior to your arrival at the agency, the Department of Ag was charged with managing the meat processing grant program as part of the COVID response under Governor Bullock. Roughly $12 million was awarded, and we would just love to hear from you kind of a status of where that grant program is and what we can anticipate seeing moving into the future related to those projects.
Well, yeah, I've been very impressed with how that worked out. As you said, Raylee, there's $12 million that have been awarded. And of that, I think now we've actually given the money more than 11 million of that. There are a few projects that we're just finishing up on, but for all intents and purposes, this is a $12 million grant program that has nearly been completed. We gave out 106 different businesses across 46 counties, all these grants. And I've read some of the compliments that we've received from the recipients of those grants, and it's extremely positive. I've certainly been impressed with how the department handled that. And I think it made a positive difference for the whole meat processing aspect of our economy in Montana, which of course helps the producers that sorely needed some help during these difficult times. There are some things about it that I would like to mention. That, as you said, it was developed in response to the COVID-19 situation with the shutdowns and the big economic crises that occurred related to this. We had heard from several processors throughout the state that they were booked out 6 months or more in advance due to COVID-19. So the goal was to help those processors bolster their infrastructure and increase their capacity to help lessen those delays. And of course, that helped the producers as well. And we've got some of the projects that you look at that involved young people. Women owned some of those businesses, and we were very happy to help. We facilitated the Montana Agriculture Adaptability Program, and this was the first grant program developed to help small and medium-sized food and ag businesses to help them respond to COVID-19 using some of the state's allotment of the CARES Act funds. So we gave out over $1 million that was awarded to 109 different projects across 40 counties. So a lot of those projects were focused on increasing on-farm storage, because that was one of the big problems for both farmers and ranchers was, they had cattle, they had grain, but there was no place to sell it. So they had to figure out how to store or keep the cattle somewhere on their premises. And this managed to help with that storage. And so there were a lot of investments that we think helped out the farmers and ranchers of Montana. And, it always helps with the supply chain when there's a disruption. So in doing that bolstered the food security within our state, and was somewhat of a silver lining when we look at the state's response to all the unfortunate circumstances brought on by COVID-19.
Yeah, thanks. And certainly, the situation we've been faced with brought to light a lot of the challenges we do face in kind of the processing in Montana and some of the challenges that these local processors face. And then really the challenges also, as you mentioned, just from an ag perspective, if we'd like to get a beef butchered, we're sometimes at least a year out in best case scenario. And so it's nice to see that, we have potential to kind of bolster the opportunity for those local processors to ultimately help, the rest of the livestock industry. So yeah, we're glad to hear that. But just kind of also moving on a little bit, I know that you've only really been in the director role for a couple of weeks. Certainly have a long history of agriculture, but we'd just like to hear a little bit more about the future of the Department of Ag and maybe share a little of your vision for the agency.
Well, thank you, Jay. And, internally, I've made it clear that really what I'm looking for from all the employees of the Department of Ag is that I want professionalism and teamwork and high quality internal and external customer service. And if you look at from a broader scope of what we've already been talking about with what I hope we're able to do to help everyone in agriculture, I think that we need to look at what kind of value-added programs or projects can we work on. And we're already seeing some of these ideas percolate from the private sector. And that, of course, is the best place for those ideas to come from. And if there's a way that the Department of Ag can help or partner or even convene some people to talk about ways to help, then that's important. And I can tell you that one of the things that I'm always interested in with livestock is the transportation side of it, because a lot of times we're shipping calves or whatever. That can be a costly endeavor, and I want to make sure that we work together with the Montana Department of Transportation, for instance. If we are able to identify where some of the key ag economic corridors are, then maybe we can look at some of the 2-lane roads, for instance, and say, now to help out agriculture, does it make sense that maybe we should widen this road? Or how about the bridges? Do they need shored up and upgraded so that shipping can work a lot easier and the end result would be cheaper? And so those are the kinds of things that I want to explore. And then even with the meat processing, maybe there's some next steps that can occur that will help our producers that, in order so that there isn't that long waiting period. And the more we can get done within this state, then I think the better off it is. And, there's that long-standing discussion of, well, what about feedlots? And I don't necessarily have the answer, but I think we should try to see what kind of discussions can occur that have the potential of leading to some economic development that, again, will benefit our livestock producers.
Director Foster, we had the opportunity to interview Lieutenant Governor Juris last week and chatted about Governor Gianforte's executive order regarding the red tape task force. And I know that she's kind of charged with leading that, but has mentioned that each agency will be engaged within that process. So just wanted to chat with you a little bit more about what that directive kind of means for your agency and how you will be implementing that process within the Department of Ag.
Well, and as Lieutenant Governor Juris discussed, that's one of the main building blocks of the new administration. Governor Gianforte has really emphasized improving our economy, and we just got done talking about that. I'm proud to be part of that effort that the governor is pushing hard for, and it's great. One of the other things that he talked about is he wants the way we conduct business to change in Montana as a state government. And so we've already started some discussions within our department of ideas for how we can become a more efficient operation, more bang for the buck sort of thing. And I haven't had the opportunity yet to sit down with Lieutenant Governor Juris and the other folks who will be involved in that process. But, I give compliments to our department, and I got to tell you, I've been very impressed with the Department of Agriculture. The folks there are truly dedicated to helping the agricultural industry in Montana. And so they've been very supportive of seeing if there are ways that we can do things better and be creative a little bit in how we do that. And so I'm excited for where those discussions go and what ideas that might develop into some very constructive and beneficial new ways of doing exactly what Governor Gianforte wants, which is a new way of conducting business for state government.
Great. I think that wraps up our questions for today, Director Foster, but we very much welcome you into your position, and we really do look forward to your leadership in the Department of Ag. It's just the number one industry in Montana, and any opportunity we have to build on that, we look forward to working with you in your position.
Well, thank you very much, Jay and Raylee. I've enjoyed this, and anytime you would like to visit with me or any of our people in the Department of Ag, we're very open to that, and I look forward to working with you.
I'd like to once again just thank Mike for Director Foster for joining us. He's has a great, strong agricultural background. Prove that certainly with Farm Service Agency, and we know that he's going to do good and do great things in his new position. So thank you very much, Mike, for joining us.
And we'd just like to remind our audience that you can make sure to subscribe to The Rancher's Voice, follow us on our social channels, and make sure to like, share, and comment on each episode. If you have any questions for us, feel free to shoot us an email at Kenny, Keni, @mtbeef.org. And thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, everybody.